Hello and welcome to episode 5 of the FOD, the future of all things digital commerce. We are more than halfway through the series now. I hope you've all been enjoying it. If this is your first time tuning in, then series 4 is all about the move to composable architecture and how you can navigate some of the pitfalls before you come across them. Welcome, Alex.
Hello.
Alex has held the role of Director of Enterprise Systems at Boden for the last 5 years. Before this, he spent the previous 2 as an enterprise architect. Tell us a bit more about your time with Boden over the last 10 years, please, Alex.
Thanks, James. So I have been doing roles as sort of director of enterprise systems and before that enterprise architecture, generally looking after all of our applications and systems of record from an off-the-shelf sort of perspective, and then collaborating with the engineering function, building the services, driving the integrations between those applications. So if any of you haven't heard of Boden, it is a sort of e-commerce fashion retailer in sort of mainly 3 markets: Germany, UK, and the US, selling women's wear and children's wear.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for the introduction. Now, this is an interesting one for me because obviously Boden as a business is very well established, and you guys have gone through quite a considerable rebranding over the last sort of 12 to 18 months, I believe, which obviously has an impact on the technology decisions that you guys want to use as well. So I guess there's no better place to get things started with talking through some of the challenges that you faced during your time with Boden, particularly in your more recent role at Director of Enterprise Systems.
So one of the sort of the history of Boden, it was originally a catalogue focused retailer, and the whole business model came from sending catalogues to people, and then they would call into our call center or send us a piece of paper with an order written on it, and that's how we fulfill the needs of our customers. So as sort of e-commerce and the internet really kicked off in the early noughties, it was a blindingly obvious opportunity for this business. It's not come from a bricks and mortar shop front state. It's come from, mailed catalogs and people phoning in type thing. So as e-commerce became a thing, it was pretty obvious to Boden that it needed a website to basically enable people to take orders and go and put the orders on themselves, and massively reduce the overhead on customer services to support the order taking, but still driving the customer engagement through a strong catalog presence. What that really meant is we built a lot of our systems ourselves because it was very early, and indeed we built a lot of our sort of website and even our back-end systems records across order management, product information, not warehousing, which was an established off-the-shelf warehousing sort of situation, but a lot of the applications needed to run an e-commerce business we've ended up building ourselves a very long time ago, and then we've basically run down that investment over the last 15 years, and so the environment is full with a lot of legacy systems that, when you self-build this stuff, then you churn through a lot of the people who've actually done the building of it. There's sort of some documentation. It's not documented thoroughly enough, as always. You talk to anyone in technology, they'll turn around and tell you it's not documented thoroughly enough. And we sort of were in a position about 5 years ago where we needed to invest heavily into a digital transformation to take us away from some of these legacy systems. So we started with the front end, but the idea is to work through all of the back end as well. So we had our entire e-commerce platform was built ourselves, including the UI and the sort of merchandising capability, the search capability, and the product data capability. So we've done a lot of work over the last 5 years, taking out the glass effectively and replacing that with an off-the-shelf CMS. We've put in a search and merch application off the shelf as well. And we've put in our own a off-the-shelf PIM in order to manage the product information. So we've sort of taken that monolith and broken it apart into individual components, and taken out bits of it until we've got to a more manageable place. And we're now just left with the sort of legacy commerce applications. So the sort of customer, my account stuff, promotion engine, order taking, but the rest of the bits around it, we've managed to replace with different composable off-the-shelf applications. And we've built a service layer to take the information out of those applications and expose it to the front end and drive our customer experience. So that's the biggest challenge, coming to the biggest challenge of all of that.
It's good to paint the picture.
It really has been trying to break up these monolithic systems. That what tends to happen is, as you build it yourself over time, the knowledge of the existing code gets lost, and as you move through engineers and people, then everyone has less knowledge, and also, we built it so long ago, it was all sort of on tin, not able to spin up new environments, automated testing, that sort of thing. So people had avoided touching the existing code, right? And they've extended the monolith by building extra components within the monolith around the side of the existing code. But those components end up superseding another piece of feature that existed before and sort of overwriting it and taking the data around that feature. And so it becomes a really challenging nest to unpick. And as we've tried to do that, to move out each component, we've faced quite a few challenges in where we've made assumptions about how something works because we can see this part of the code does this function. And then actually, when you come to replace it and integrate it and test it, you figure out that there's another piece of the code that's completely unrelated to the bit that you thought was doing it, that's doing another piece of feature that breaks when you stick a new set of data through it. So it's been really painful in that regard, especially around testing and data migration. There's lots of surprises that come at you in that phase of any program when dealing with some of this legacy.
I can imagine you're certainly not the first person that I've spoken to who has mentioned something similar. When you just have like plasters upon plasters within the technology function, you're not really sure what you're unearthing, and it can often be more hassle than it's worth, I guess. But what I guess would be interesting to ask is, you started this journey of breaking down your self-built monolith about 5 years ago. What at that point in time, I guess the whole buzz around composable didn't exist. So this is probably a decision that you would have made because you felt it was the best thing to do at the time. What made you go down that route? What was it that made you feel like, Jill, actually we're gonna go and we're gonna buy these certain products and we're gonna build them around our ecosystem rather than going out and just getting your SAP Hybris, for example, at the time, or your Commerce Cloud or what have you?
Yeah, so the legacy doesn't end in the front end in our case as well. So we have a sort of self-built order management system as well that also masters the customer record on top of it. So the customer record effectively mastered in two places. It's mastered in our self-built commerce functionality and our self-built OMS, which also was doing customer services. So at the time, we were faced with a decision around best of breed versus a sort of off-the-shelf platform. And when we looked at it, the features that the business was most interested in was the ability to get the content authoring and drive that customer experience at the top of the funnel, and wow them with really great content and improve the search, the sort of sort order on the PLP, and the way that we could curate experiences for the customer to help her find the product that's most interesting to her. So for me, that quite quickly speaks to, well, the PIM is going to improve the product information and make our ability to maintain and adapt that and react to trends far quicker and easier. The CMS side is going to enable us to be more flexible and creative with how we put the content together, and the search and merch piece is going to drive that discovery through the PLP and through the product browsing journey. So we took those three feature sets, said, well, we can go best of breed in that. And at the time, there weren't many, none of the off-the-shelf platforms really did PIM very well, for example. And then the whole way that our legacy commerce engine interacts with our legacy OMS was a massive piece of scope, right? So to replace that by going onto a single platform was going to create a really, really large program. And so by taking this what would have been called a composable approach, but we called it best of breed back then, because as you said, the composable thing wasn't really
a term, was it? No.
It really enabled us to deliver the features that the business was most focused on, and saw as the most important things to unlocking our strategy, while managing the scope and the risk, and really approaching it component by component, which, obviously, as we've done that, a lot of the challenges that comes with breaking up a legacy monolith have come out, but they've come out in sort of independently deliverable chunks, rather than, I think, if we tried to jump onto a platform coming from such a legacy self-built perspective, those issues would have been multiplied by 5.
Okay.
And you can imagine, how you lose that faith and investment in the program over time as those issues start coming up from a stakeholder perspective. So there would have been a fairly, from a technology perspective, there would be a fairly sizable risk that if we decided to replace the whole thing big bang onto another platform, we might never have got it done.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I guess that's it. I mean, I guess the scale of it is far higher when you're going for the big bang approach. And if you can just look at the however many key points you want to address in the short term, in this case, there were the 3 that you mentioned, and you can take them best of breed and get by with the other bits that you have, then, I mean, that certainly makes sense.
Yeah. And while we were doing it, we were also implementing a sort of service layer underneath it, so that we can actually make the integration more flexible in the future. So we were implementing domain services around the key data entities, product, price, imagery, stock, basically. That means that we could then take any other selling channel and plug it onto that service layer. And also, if we wanted to switch things out in the future, we would be much more agile and much more capable of doing that, because we have the sort of consistent data mastered in the service layer at the entity level and domain service, that can then be surfaced up to other applications with clear contracts and use cases of the data, and actually that automated testing baked into it. So we've done a lot of investment around the sort of integration that underpins it, while we've done that breakdown of the components. Interestingly enough, in the current world and where we sit now, most of the features that everyone is really keen to get from a business perspective is more around things like having wish lists to add your product to, new payment types, promotions, that sort of thing. So now we're looking at tackling that commerce part of it, and actually we've ended up looking at whether a platform now is the right approach for us, or we want to maintain our composable architecture, and keep that in place. And the service layer really, it helps us be able to do that, right? Because if we put a new single platform in over the top of it. We still have all of that data exposed, but the reason for the sort of drive towards, well, should we use a platform rather than our sort of composable way of operating at the moment, is what we've found is that once you are in that sort of componentized environment, you do take on additional costs in that you have to manage teams with specialties in each of those components, in each of those areas. And then in order to deliver features within it, a lot of things become cross-functional and cross-team. And so you have to have another layer of sort of operation and management across those individual teams in order to plan effectively, get dependent features delivered at the same time, and really organize yourself effectively, as well as just being able to write efficient and excellent code or deliver individual features. You also have to be able to glue it all together, and the gluing it all together requires more sort of senior technology, more sort of architecture investment. So as well as as I spoke about, the sort of delivery management piece in order to synchronize what everyone's doing. So there are some challenges we're facing there, and there's a view that actually now a lot of the business strategy has changed. We are not so interested in having great search and merchandising capability because our product range is not that vast. It's not that difficult to go find the products you want. We're only selling our biggest categories, maybe dresses, and we're selling 200 dresses at most, right? So it's not actually that difficult to find the product you want on our site. And so some of the business strategy is switching more towards, well, what I really want is the ability to adopt those commerce features quickly and have a more basic templated UI that I just switch my content out into, with different assets, that sort of thing. So it really does depend on what your business is trying to achieve, to find the right fit for you. If your business is trying to be a leader in the e-commerce space, then composable is always going to be the right way to go, right? If you're trying to be you want to be really inventive about how you deliver e-commerce, well, then you're going to want to put the features in that you want and have the flexibility to put those features anywhere inside your stack. But where our business is at the moment, and is more around, well, we're a fashion business, not an e-commerce business. We want to inspire our customers, and we want to spend more time putting great content together, rather than putting a really disruptive selling experience in front of our customer. So that's where some of our sort of thinking and decisioning is heading at the moment. The slight, we've not committed to a direction at the moment. We're still thinking about it, because at the same time as those core business goals are pointing us more towards a single platform approach at the moment, there are also some fairly unique use cases that we do today that the business isn't very keen on moving away from. So we offer back orders to our customers, where they can purchase stock that's on a purchase order still being made at the supplier, up to 12 weeks in advance of it actually arriving in our store. And that's fairly unusual, and it creates all sorts of challenges around how you capture payments, and whether you capture payment at dispatch, and does the auth run out on the payment, because the auth only has a life of 30 days. Doesn't work very well with a lot of the buy now, pay later type payment types that are becoming very popular nowadays. And so is not really easy. It's not very easily natively supported by your core commerce platforms that are primarily focused on the sort of what everyone wants out of commerce, right?
Mhm.
And then another piece is in Germany there is a lot of the e-commerce. Basically, if you want to sell in Germany, everyone expects to buy it on invoice and then pay for it themselves when the goods arrive, and so that's why things like Klarna and PayPal Pay Later are great in the German market. But we obviously set up a big German presence many years ago, and so we created our own invoice and credit management solution with a partner in Germany in order to actually manage the credit file ourselves. So we've always invoiced our customers in Germany and then collected payment from them 14 days after they've received the goods. And so I think, Klarna, and there were other buy now, pay later platforms available.
Klarna's the main one, right? That's what everyone refers to, don't they? So
they probably offer a better customer experience in that the customers can go on there, log on, see what they're waiting for payment for, that sort of thing. Whereas our invoice, our sort of self invoice system is very much like the customer has to know what they need to pay, and they need to pay it to us, and then we reconcile it on our end. And if we think it's different, we then have to contact them and all this sort of stuff. But the overhead, the sort of cost of us to operate that payment type is very small comparatively to the commission that your buy now, pay later payment providers are asking for. Then weighing back against this, should we go into a platform conversation because the platform doesn't support it? So now we're going to have to bespoke a lot of things or find ingenious solutions or build our own components and integrate them in as part of an MVP, and that sort of bloats the scope back again. So, from my perspective, making the choice between whether you should pursue a composable architecture or whether you should go for an all-in-one in the box has to be driven by what outcomes your business is looking to achieve, what your business thinks is unique to it and it wants to retain, versus what it thinks can actually it can change and it can adopt what everyone else is using. If you're quite happy to go out and say, okay, your big platform has got thousands of customers on it, they're all asking for fairly similar things. If I can go adopt what those customers are doing, I can make sure I'm up there but not leading the e-commerce world, that sort of thing. If that's your goal and you're willing to give up the niche things that you do in your business from a sort of e-commerce perspective, then for me, the platform approach does enable you to adopt new features on their roadmap quicker into your own business. But if your business is standing behind what it does and the way it does it and how it wants to sell that to its customer, will then you're very much more going to enjoy a composable architecture, because you're going to have that flexibility and agility to put what you want where you want it, and to really adapt to the best out there.
Yeah, so as that uniqueness point is actually something that's really interesting, because it wasn't that long ago I spoke to a lady who works for a very well-known high street coffee chain, and we were talking about their setup, and they said the reason they were in composable was because they wanted to do something that had never been done before in their industry.
Yeah.
And the only way they could do that is by doing something for the first time. If they went down the route everyone else had gone down, then they would be doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And whilst that sounds pretty straightforward, it was the first time I had it explained to me in such a basic term, and I was like, Joe, that makes complete sense. And it's actually it just made sense. And I was like, that's a great idea. And
Yeah.
what they have done since has been really cool. And hopefully maybe we can discuss that on here at some point as well. Going back to what you were saying then is around, for Boden in particular, is case of the unique and quirkiness you have around being able to order some stock before it's actually been fully produced and then delivered is something that's unique to you guys. And actually, maybe you can't do that using an out of the box platform. So do
Yeah.
you want to keep that ability, or do you maybe want to remove that at risk of possibly upsetting some of your customers, but then you maybe have an enhanced commerce experience with a platform? I guess that's the million dollar question, right? And you never really know the answer until you've made the wrong decision.
Yes, yeah, 100%. But yeah, I think that's the key for me before jumping in is to really dig into that question, and as well as you possibly can, try to answer it and try to match what your business wants to what the platform is offering, or if that match, understand, have that conversation about, if you're going for a platform, these are the things that you're probably going to have to give up before making a platform commitment. And that is nigh on impossible to get right. But if your business is very keen on things that make it an individual player, then yeah, definitely a composable approach is a solid one, and it's going to enable you to do that. Obviously, as I mentioned before, it comes with some overheads in terms of cost in your internal technology. The other thing we found slightly challenging is, from our perspective, we sort of do capsules or ranges or assortments of products that reflect the brand at a period of time, right? So we sort of go, right, the month of August is going to look like this. We're going to launch these products. We're going to sell it this way, and we're going to show it to the customer this way. When you have a sort of composable architecture, you need to govern the launching of the products, the new content, any new promotional activity, the new prices. All of that needs to happen at the same time, so you build a whole new consistent experience. And when you're on a single platform, you don't even think about it, right? Because the platform coordinates all of that coming together. And in our sort of current composable state, we end up having to use a lot of integration logic in order to bring that together in a joined up fashion. So sort of each system of record is saying this thing's going to, like, these products are going to launch on this date, these prices are going to launch on this date. And then we have to bring it together and make sure that it's all aligned to the new concept and the integration, for then it to all automatically happen in this joined up experience to land for the customer. So that was sort of a learning that we didn't expect going in, and it's caused us to do some slightly odd things, like bending our PIM slightly out of shape. So it's like managing site taxonomy so that you can get the products linked to the right node in the site hierarchy. And that, like, for example, when you move out of a summery feel into an autumnal feel, well, you're no longer going to have swimsuits and beachwear so prominent in your hierarchy. You're going to move a lot of it into clearance, that sort of thing. So that relationship ended up having to live in the PIM, and the PIM didn't become about managing product information solely. It also had to do a bit of this sort of knowledge of the taxonomy of the website. And then you also had to have the knowledge of that taxonomy in the CMS as well. So you sort of had it in two different places. People had to update it, and you had to make sure it matched in the middle, sort of thing. So some of those challenges come at you from a composable perspective. But if you want to do something individual, and you want to do something that is your business, and your business wants to be a leader and differentiate itself, then it is the only way you can achieve that, really, I think.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say you've been quite open and honest around some of the challenges that you faced, and this is exactly why I wanted to put this podcast together, because it is complex. It's different to what a lot of businesses have been through before, and there will be many instances that come up along the journey, whether that be 6 months, 2 years, however long it might take, because it is a journey that you go on, and that people won't have experienced before. And like you said, with the PIM and the CMS and what have you, people that maybe listening to this will hear it and think, okay, well, that's something to keep an eye on, to look out for. I guess we spoke a lot about the challenges. I guess what would be really good to get from yourself, Alex, would be your 3 tips to people that are considering going on the journey, or maybe they've just started the journey. But what 3 tips would you share to them that are going to be key to a successful transformation?
Yeah. So I think the first piece for me is you're gonna need really clear business goals. You want to know what is the priorities of what you want to get out of your new architecture. And then, this is the major advantage of the composable approach. Break it down into deliveries that achieve the goals, right? And go at them one at a time and break out from, if you're in a monolith or a platform environment, just break it out bit by bit so that you can deliver incremental value along the journey. And then get people excited and get them bought into it, and then that keeps driving that wheel of improvement and growth. So that would be my first call out. The second call out is you need a really strong solution architecture and business analysis team to really make it work. Like, the sort of challenges where we didn't have a single platform publishing content and synchronizing everything. We skinned it one way by adding stuff to the PIM, but you could skin that challenge in a composable architecture any hundred of ways, right? Whereas in a platform architecture, you're like, right, I put a platform in, how does the platform do it? That's how I have to do it, sort of thing. But when you're in this composable world, you really have to understand exactly what the challenges of the business are, so that detailed business analysis, and then you'll have multiple options of solutions, and picking the best one, or often the least worst one, is really important. So having a strong business analysis and solution architecture team is really going to enable you to succeed in that. And then the third point would be, again, to try and minimize the amount of scope in each phase, right? Just do one thing, then do the next thing, and just keep that value going. Often with transformation programs, the biggest challenge is keeping stakeholders engaged. If you go do a big 12-month delivery, and then you've got all of these gremlins that you find out in testing and data migration, and you add another 3 months on the end of it and stuff. By the time you get to the other side of it, people can become very disillusioned, forgot about what the value is that you were going after in the first place. And if you're going into that composable space, what you're going to be looking to do is do one thing, then the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, right? So if you create this really large delivery that sort of loses or wears out the engagement from all the stakeholders around it, and then you finally get that bit in, and then you want to go, right, we're on to the next thing now. You're pushing water uphill a little bit, because everyone's sort of lost a lot of their vibe and enthusiasm from the long deliverable in the first place. So if you can, anything you can do, and I know from experience it's not ever really possible in a lot of cases. Like, if you're changing a system of record, you've got to move the whole thing, right? It's going to be a big job. But anything you can do to release value quickly and in small chunks is really going to help keep people engaged with what you're doing, and keep driving that train forward.
Yeah, that value piece is something that's been discussed a few times, actually, particularly from a stakeholder point of view, to keep them engaged, to keep the money flowing, to avoid the questions you don't want to be asked, and for them to see value. So I think it's good that you emphasize that. The one point you did mention was the solution architecture and the business analysis practice. The first person that's highlighted that, actually, in the conversation that we've had. But I would agree. I think that's key. Like, if you look at it from a BA perspective, the whole requirement gathering piece is going to be absolutely fundamental to a successful transformation. Was there anything in particular that you did at Boden that you felt ensured that was as good as possible? And also, just to be clear, did you guys do everything completely in-house, or did you rely on any third parties as well?
Yeah, no. So we had SIs for each of the sort of applications that we were implementing, but they would be primarily saying, this is how you put the application in. The key of the glue to bringing all this composable architecture together is inevitably the integration in the middle. So that was the bit that we owned, and we had to bring it all together. And I've talked a bit about the service layer that we built to enable that. From a business analysis and solution architecture perspective, certainly within the business analysis function, we kept as much of that as possible in-house. You really need to focus on aligning them to domains and getting them really close to business and understanding the domain. And then the biggest one that would really help as well is having that domain knowledge and that detailed knowledge of your domain, but really empowering them to step outside the domain as well. In a retail business, like, okay, we are operating an e-commerce function, but the e-commerce function is there selling product that is bought by another team, that's attributed by another team, that is coming on a boat into the warehouse on a different date, depending on versus what you were expecting to launch it from an e-commerce perspective. And so the domain structure is really important to grow knowledge. And this is true of both BA and solution architects, right? You need a domain structure. So you've got people who are experts in that area, but you have to take those experts and you have to empower them to also look outside, because there's always an upstream. And it's often when you're developing new solutions, you miss the thing in the upstream input that's actually going to completely break it. And then that's when you get to implementing it, testing it, and you're like, oh, we didn't know about that. And that's where some of the troubles happen. So yeah, I think domain alignment is vital for growing that knowledge. But then you've got to find a way to empower them to get outside their domains as well, and really go upstream. And then you'll end up with the best solutions you can find.
Nice. All right. Well, so a handful of really good tips there. So thank you for sharing that, Alex. We kind of, throughout the conversation, we've focused quite a lot around Boden and the part around the possibilities as to why you may move towards a platform, and to why you may stay composable, which ultimately is kind of answer question 3. I think it's probably fair to say that a summary of that for you would be, if you have something unique as a business you want to continue with, and that is important for you, then it would probably make sense to go composable. But if you're more of a generic business where the masses that use you, in this case, shop the ladies that shop with the web on the websites, then actually a platform could be the best solution. I guess, is there anything else that you would want to add to that in terms of any sort of companies that may not want to go down the composable route?
I think, yeah, I think you've summed it up. It's basically, what is your thing as a business, right? If your thing is to be a leader in e-commerce, then you'll definitely need to go down the composable route. I think for us, our thing as a business is to make wonderful product that excites our customer, right? Our focus as a fashion business is on making beautiful product and content to support it, to really inspire our customers. And we're not focused on being an e-commerce business, right? That's the way we sell our dream to our customers, sort of thing. So that's what's influencing our decision. But then, as I sort of called out, as you make that decision, if there are still things that you do as a business that you don't want to stop doing, then that also needs to feed into it.
It's hard. It's looking at what's most important to you. I've spoken to 2 fashion retail brands, both predominantly they are both fully on online fashion retail brands. One has made the move composable, and one wanted to, but actually decided that it probably wasn't the right thing at the end of the day, and they are now going down a SaaS platform route. So it just goes to show you, I think you've got to look at your business demands, what's most important for you as a business, and you've got to make the call. Don't get sucked into what's hot at the time, because like you said, yes, there's lots of benefits to going composable, but equally it might not be right. It is expensive. You need more manpower. You need the full business buy-in for it to be successful, and everything else. You might get something all fancy at the end of it, but is that what you need? And is that how much you want to spend, right? But cool, I'm conscious for time. So I guess let's try and wrap this up quickly then. And how do you see the next 2 years looking for within the composable space?
Yeah, I think to to be honest, when businesses get to a certain scale where they have so many things that they do that add value, that have driven efficiency into the business, and they want to keep supporting them, and they want to keep adding and adding and adding, then the composable piece is a really good answer to that, and is really going to enable them to fly. And so I can see much more big enterprises engaging with this approach in the next couple of years. I think, and it's not really in the next 2 years of composable, but I suppose my final watch out is, I feel in the world of technology, there's so much sort of drive to learn new things and to adopt new things, and everyone in technology wants to be working on the next thing, because what we do is so interesting, and it's so the challenges are so persistent and always the same, right? Like, we talk about decoupling systems and microservices and things like that, but ultimately all of the technology layer is trying to allow systems to act independently, while the data ultimately couples everything together, right? All of the data will bring everything back together. And so, I think everything that we come up with as an industry is trying to solve an immutable problem that data couples systems and functions together. And so it's all really interesting, and everyone is really engaged and wants to learn and try the next thing. And so from a leadership perspective in technology, the biggest challenge and the biggest thing to focus on for me is linking what the business wants to do to those technology decisions, because so much enthusiasm will be within the industry to try new things and try new ways to solve that problem. But actually, you have to really make sure the technology that you're going to invest in is right for your business, and meets the clear goals of your business. And if your business is struggling to be clear about that, you have to hold your ground and push to get that clarity before you commit. Because if you commit without the clarity, then what will happen is, as you get halfway down the journey, you'll find out all of these things that everyone's unwilling to give up, and then you'll end up adding more and more scope into a program, and it'll drift right, and then people will be looking at you like, why didn't you know this? So, I think that's key.
You sound like a man who speaks from experience. I guess not only will it add more and more time, it adds a few more zeros to the end of it as well, I imagine, as well, which is not what nobody wants.
Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, I would agree. I mean, I think we're already seeing the enterprises move in this space. There's a number of sort of genuine sort of high scale transformations happening right now, and I think it's going to continue. It seems to be the way the industry is going. My question is it going to remain in this kind of pure kind of composable best of breed space, or is there going to be some kind of middle ground, which I think will probably become the norm over the next couple of years as it becomes widely adopted? But look, really appreciate your time today, Alex. Thank you for joining. Thank you for sharing a lot about your personal story as well as Boden's story and some of the challenges that you guys have faced, and obviously importantly some of the tips that you would share with our listeners who are about to go on the journey, which is generally from some of the experiences that you faced doing it yourself. So look, before we go, please do like and share and review on your desired channels. Obviously the aim of this is to educate those that are considering making the move composable, and just educating our wider audience to avoid some of the pitfalls that many have fallen into. But look, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Thank you. Thanks, Alex.